Hello and welcome to the video tutorial series by LearnBiz Simulations. In this module, we will introduce you to the macros. We'll cover the following topics in this video: basics of macros, building a macro, running a macro, editing the macro, and finally, macro security. If you perform a task repeatedly in Microsoft Excel, you can automate the task with a macro. A macro is a series of commands and functions that are stored in a Visual Basic mode module and can be run whenever you need to perform the task. With macros, you not only speed up the procedure considerably, but you also assure that each step in the task is carried out in the same way each and every time you perform the task. You can create macros in one of the two ways. Use Excel's micro recorder to record your actions as you undertake them in a worksheet, or enter the instructions that you want to be followed in VBA code in the Visual Basic editor. Either way, Excel creates a special module sheet that holds the action and instructions in your macro. The macro instructions in the macro module are stored in the Visual Basic for Applications programming language. Excel's micro recorder is used to record your actions as you undertake them in a worksheet and saved in the macro. Note the macro recorder doesn't record the keystrokes or mouse actions that you take to accomplish an action, but only the VBA code required to perform the action itself. This means that mistakes that you make while taking an action that you rectify won't be recorded as part of the macro. Only the corrected entry shows up in the macro. To use the macro recorder, click on the macros group under the View tab and click Record Macro, or use the Developer tab. If you can't find the Developer tab, same can be activated from the File tab under the Options and in the Customize Ribbon dialog box. Under the Developer tag, click on Record Macro in the Code group to open the Record Macro dialog box. Under the macro name, give your macro descriptive name. Shortcut key is optional and will allow you to run the macro by holding down the control key and pressing the chosen letter on the keyboard. For example, Ctrl plus T can be used to run our macro. Store macro in helps you to specify where you want to store the macro. This workbook means the macro is available only in this file. New workbook opens a new Excel file and the macro is available only in this new file, while the personal macro workbook option stores your macros in a hidden file called personal.xls, which makes them available to you in all Excel files and can be run from any workbook that you have opened. And the optional description is required. Click the OK button in the Record Macro dialog to start the micro recorder. Now perform the tasks you want to do repeatedly in the same way you do them in Excel. For example, I would like to add the title as LearnBiz Simulations and format it in a particular way. So let us do that. Once you have done it, stop the recording using Stop Recording button in the Developer tab. So the macro is recorded. Now let's run the macro to perform the same task again, this time for different worksheet. Click the View Macros option on the Macro command button on the View tab, or click the Macros command button on the Developer tab. Open the macro dialog box. Excel lists the names of all the macros in the current workbook and in your personal macro workbook. In the macro name list box, click the name of the macro that you want to play and click the Run button. If you assign the shortcut keystroke to the macro, you don't have to bother opening the macro dialog box to play the macro. Simply press Ctrl plus the shortcut key and Excel immediately plays back all the commands that you recorded. And we get the same action using the macro here. Note that when recording cell references in a macro, the macro recorder always inserts absolute references in the macro sheet. This means the work will happen in the same area as was done originally while recording, as in this case. But relative references uses relative cell addresses while recording a macro, making the macro more versatile by enabling you to run it in the areas of worksheet other than the ones originally used in the macros recorder. One can also edit the macro using the usual basic editor with the help of some Visual Basic programming language skills. This can be found out by clicking the edit button in the macro dialog box. The Visual Basic editor with the background code is shown. You can choose to edit it. The actual VB programming is beyond the scope of this tutorial. Macros security. Macros are very useful but potentially dangerous as they can contain viruses. Viruses are programs that are written by individuals, usually with the intent to destroy or corrupt data. When you open an affected workbook or perform an action that triggers a microvirus, the virus can become active, be transported to your computer, and be stored in personal.xlsx, a hidden workbook, or some other undetectable location. From that point on, every workbook you save can be infected automatically with the virus. To prevent this, macro has added security. When you run a macro in your worksheet that's not saved in the trusted locations on your computer, such as templates, etc., in your user area on the computer, Excel checks to see if the macro is digitally signed. You can open the macro setting tab of the Trust Center dialog box by clicking the macro security command button on the developer tab. You can select one of the following options. Disable all macros without notification to disable all macros not saved in one of your computer's trusted location and all security alerts so that you have no way to run the macro. Disable all macros with notification. This is the default to allow disabling them of macros to maintain control over running potentially untrustworthy macros. Disable all macros except digitally signed macros to automatically enable digitally signed macros from a publisher that you have indicated is trustworthy, and to disable all macros that are not digitally signed without notification. Enable all macros to throw all caution to the wind and allow all macros to run in a worksheet you open. This is not recommended as potentially dangerous code can run. To change the trusted locations on your computer, you need to click the Trusted Locations tab in the Trust Center dialog box and add or change the locations. That's it in this video. This brings us to the end of the Excel video tutorial series. Thanks for watching. Hope you had good time learning Excel with us, and now it's the time to experience it by doing it yourself. You may visit our website www.learnbizsimulations.com to check out some of our business simulation games for learning and assessment. Thank you.